All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Red, White, and Matt show with Kenny. Today, Kenny is actually here. Yeah, he is now back. Um, but today we're going into our Discovery series. This is now our second episode of that series where we kind of dive into one topic, discuss that topic, and get into it. We felt like this topic was pretty necessary for the current situation and kind of what we have to look forward to after, um, essentially after the crisis that we've been in for quite a while now, I would say. Future pandemics after COVID-19. This is just kind of a random map, nothing particular about this. I didn't go and pull it for a specific reason.
It's like you got it off some communist website. That's a lot of red there.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be like an outbreak, basically. All right, so future pandemics likely to be deadlier and more frequent, warns UN panel. There are up to 850,000 viruses which link the novel coronavirus, which exists in animals and may be able to infect people. Habitat destruction and insatiable consumption made animal airborne diseases far more likely to make the jump to people in the future. The same human activities that drive climate change and biodiversity loss also drive pandemic risks through their impacts on our agriculture. COVID-19 was the sixth pandemic since the influenza outbreak of 1918, all of which had been entirely driven by human activities. 70% of emerging diseases such as Ebola, Zika, and HIV/AIDS are zoonotic in origin, meaning they circulate in animals before jumping to humans. Around 5 new diseases break out among humans every single year, any of which has the potential to become a pandemic. Among the options for policymakers to reduce the likelihood of a COVID-19 rerun are taxes or levies on meat consumption, livestock production, and other forms of high pandemic risk activities. The assessment also suggested better regulation of international wildlife trade and empowering indigenous communities to better preserve wild habitats. This was pulled from a France 24 article, which has a link to the actual UN panel or whatever, and has a very lengthy document in it. But this was a good breakdown of that document. This slide right here is from that same document from the UN panel, which kind of shows you the cycles here. So on the left part, it says microbes are a key part of wildlife diversity and often drive population dynamics. So you have the wildlife on the outer ring and the inner ring. It's different microbes. In the middle, you have anthropogenic environmental changes. So you have land degradation, habitat loss. For the land degradation, you have microbe communities altered, and then habitat loss, increased interaction among animals and species. And then on the right side of that graph, you have spillover among wildlife, livestock, and people. So you have the animals, then you have the zoonotic spillover, which comes to us. Then you have the zoonotic spillover from humans to animals, and then the cycle kind of goes around and around with microbes being in the middle. But let's go back here, slide. So we'll break this up here, but basically the panel is saying diseases or pandemics are more likely than they were in the past because of how much abuse we've kind of done to the planet. And so essentially we have to kind of scale back the level of effect that we have on the environment. So they're saying maybe put taxes or something on meat consumption, livestock production. So there's a lot of livestock. I'm not gonna lie, I think we definitely have way too much meat consumption. I myself am a bit guilty of it. Kenny obviously is not guilty at all. I mean, look at him.
No, not at all.
And then there's.
Do you want me to go off on these guys now or wait to the end?
You can hear in a second. But yeah, and they said other forms of high pandemic risk activities I'm not really sure what that is, but they said better regulation of international wildlife trade, empowering indigenous communities to better preserve wild habitats. I will say Biden has already passed something basically that kind of aligns with this, which is like preserving more of the national wildlife parks. And part of that was the Keystone XL pipeline being canceled. Although that one was very political, I'd say also with climate change. But essentially, what they really wanted out of this is kind of like a Paris Climate Accord or agreement, whatever, for the prevention of pandemics. So it's very interesting. Um, there's probably other ways to mitigate this too, I would think, besides, like meat taxes or something. Or I think it not really like taxes on meat, because I don't know if that's a fair regulator. I would say more so of like better educational teaching to people. And nowadays we're actually moving into like meat grown in laboratories. So I'm sure people will start to get like accustomed to that anyway. Right now, I think it's a cost issue, but it's, we're definitely making changes. And this actually reminded me of a documentary I watched on like a climate change type of documentary, but it's the best bipartisan thing I've ever seen, which discusses regenerative um, agriculture, which is basically like these giant corporate farms. The cattle just like destroys land on these big giant corporate farms. And essentially what happens is when they destroy that ground, the ground then has more methane come out of it. And I mean, besides from the animals, but it adds to the like climate change. So like think about like the Dust Bowl in like Oklahoma, Texas back in, I think it was the 1920s. Is that correct? Something like that. But that land used to be arable, and actually a big part of that was too much livestock activity contributed more to that, because a lot of people moved west and started like farming and stuff out there, and they basically made the land inhabitable, and then like a lot of it just turned into desert. They think that also might have been the case for northern Africa, like thousands of years ago. They think maybe that started due to too much production with livestock and things like that. Now, I'm not saying like the entire northern Africa part. I'm pretty sure there's already desert there. It just contributed to that spreading. But definitely a big issue here. Like I said, I'm not sure if the approach is correct, and I think that's where the political aspect comes in here. I don't think they're given all the best options. You got to look to the future. Got to look at the tech that we have, and you got to look at the best way to address the problem, not just injecting political solutions to change things, if that makes sense. Kenny, what do you have? You anti-science man.
I mean, leave it to government to take an issue they created and blame the rest of us for it, and then make us pay for it. I mean, sufficient evidence exists that this current pandemic that we're facing came out of a lab. And what's their suggestion? Oh, we're going to tax your burgers now. You all can't have meat. You're all going to be soy boys because we're going to give you tofu burgers. It's borderline ridiculous. And, I would say it's partially right to say it's man-made, because if you man-made a virus in a lab and it gets out, well, that's kind of a man-made problem. But they're blaming it on an issue that's kind of separate for stuff that they've been wanting to do for 20 years, right? No, they're just taking, I forget who said it, but never let a good crisis go to waste, right? That's exactly what they're doing. They want us to go, eat their soy burgers or whatnot, because, they're not going to stop eating their meat. They're going to get their stuff. The rest of us, though, we're going to be eating all that, grass or whatever they're conjuring up to be a burger or whatnot. And as far as lab grown meat, it's how do we know we're not getting lab grown meat now? Did you see that cow get butchered? Did you see it get cut up? I didn't. Now, for all we know, we've been eating that stuff for 20 years. We just don't even know it. But, I don't know. It frustrates me when I see this, because they can't be that stupid, and then they expect us just to swallow that, pardon the French, but BS, by the shovel load. So
Yeah, I mean, so I guess like the biggest thing with this is the I guess really the issue I would say is what we can say is this, which is we do know there's going to be more pandemics, right? I mean, that's what that essentially tells us. So that
especially if they
also,
keep that Wuhan lab operating, we're probably going to have more.
yeah, well, not only that,
That was
but
some janky. Hey, that was some janky PPE they were using.
yeah,
You know, number one supplier of PPE in the world, and they got the jankiest stuff in that
and
lab right there. It's like,
right.
come on.
I don't know if you saw the trailer on that, but I put all the images in the trailer for our one of our videos. And it showed all the images that we were talking about. I was like, look at these great PPE procedures with like it's like a latex glove and like that's it, like a face shield or something. And I'm like, what
I mean, you're in
about all
a
your
level 4
skin?
bio lab. It's like, come on, guys. You're supposed to be full hazmat suit, the really thick gloves, the stuff you can walk in the microwave and get fried a little bit, to kill
Yeah.
all that garbage. But, just to deviate, just a tad. Okay, so when you do the genetic breakdown of the current pandemic, right? Whenever you get a mutation like they're talking about, you get like one amino acid changing to another amino acid. If you got a string of 6, 8, 9 amino acids all flipping at the same time, and they just happen to be identical to a different, CalSARS or whatever, that's not a mutation. That's somebody jacking with the genome
Yeah.
and then it getting out. So that's prima facie evidence that somebody was jacking with the genome on this thing, and now they're trying to force all this other Greenpeace garbage down our throat as an excuse for it. So they're using a pandemic that they created to get us to accept their terms. So
Well, my thing is,
it's frustrating because we have all these other idiots who can't see it and they want to believe what they're being told, so they don't have to accept the reality of what's really happening. And I think that is the worst outcome of all of this.
and my thing is what this shows is number one, there's going to be more type of pandemics, viruses in the future, right? Like we all know that there's going to be more viruses. Like we've already seen like Ebola, all these different, SARS, whatever it is, right? But what this also means is number one, we know governments move slow, i.e., COVID-19. Look at all the different governments and reactions, right?
Oh, they weren't slow. They were just slow to tell us while they cleaned up the mess they made for themselves.
But we
and
know
they spent like the first month getting all their own supplies and leaving us holding the bag.
Right. So we know, government efficiency is just not there, right? So
it's terrible for us. It's great for them.
So what that means is there's going to be more pandemics, diseases. So that means people have to be prepared, essentially, is what this real takeaway is. So don't think COVID-19 is going to be the only thing you see. I think we saw the last one, 100 years ago. So I think now there's probably a good likelihood we'd see another one within like 50 years. That's probably deadly or something, right? So that means we have to think about the future and say, okay, if that happens, am I going to be prepared, right? So think about when this happened, right? Don't rely on the government, okay? Don't rely on the government. So when this happened, what do we see? We saw people going to the store, buying too much stuff, right? The population continues to grow in the world. So
the shortage of toilet paper apparently is not being fixed.
Right. So like,
hey, I was in a truck stop the other day and somebody stole all the rolls of toilet paper. I'm like, why?
So right now, I'll say this: for this pandemic, the cloth masks were fine, but after this, like, you guys seriously have to think about like getting better industrial type of equipment for like masks in the future, maybe like food supplies if it was like to be worse or something like that. Just other things for you to really think about. Enough hand sanitizer, right? There's like a lot of different stuff, good medicine, stuff like that. So it's going to happen again. Don't think that this is the only time. And then also maybe even think about your jobs if you really want to, if you're going to be in the workforce that long or whatever. So like, just things to think about. But you want to go ahead to the next slide?
Well, let me touch on one thing, and maybe this is going to come up in the slides because I haven't seen them yet. Okay, so let's look back at what they want to do on like taxing meat. I want them to explain to me how their policies are going to reduce the chances of, like, say, another pandemic, right? Okay, so how are these policies going to affect, the stuff on the ground? I mean, because we all got to eat still, right? So I understand there's got to be like a healthy balance, at least temporarily, in a transition to, quote, their Green New Deal or whatever. Okay, but I want them to concretely say, okay, this is what we're doing and this is how it's going to work. If they just put out, well, you're going to do this, I don't think anybody's going to buy it. They're going to have to come up with at least some pseudoscience or something that makes sense to people. Okay, this is how it's going to work, right? Okay, so you eliminate 10 million cows. Other than the cow farts, how is that going to affect, pandemics in the future, right? Okay, so you only need one cow to go wrong to have a pandemic. So maybe if you reduce by 10 million, that's 10 million chances. I can kind of see that. But, what about things like free-ranging cows? Whereas right now we have industrial cows where you shove, 100,000 head of cattle in an area the size of a quarter square mile, right? Okay, so there's potential for stuff to go bad there because you have all these cows in close proximity where viruses, it's just like being in close proximity at a supermarket. If one cow's got it, it goes to the rest of the cows and then it can spread around. Okay, so maybe the issue isn't the fact that we have 10 million head of cows, it's 10 million head of cows in a couple of square acres.
Yeah.
So
and that right there screams back, like, if people look at agriculture, okay, we have like super high subsidies on our agriculture in the United States. Like, literally, if we were to compare it to like what is it, the World Trade Organization, and they have like our agreements, right? These things are supposed to actually be equal. The United States is like completely violating those terms, by the way. You guys should probably find this out. And what that means for us is, like, yeah, sure, there's like more jobs, maybe. There's really not a whole lot of jobs in agriculture, to be honest. But most of those jobs and those subsidies are going towards corporate farms. Okay, corporate farms have came in and taken away a lot of jobs from like small farmers. They broke them into like these deals, these contracts that is very hard for them to get out of. They put them in debt. They pretty much crushed lots of small farms. So don't think these subsidies are going to like small farmers. That's not the case. And what Kenny said is great, because that means we want more of these free range animals, smaller farms. And guess what? They're going to have more activity or more ability to go out and spread around, not, use up all the grass and like this small thing of land with like hundreds, thousands of cows or whatever your animal is. So I think it's a great way to get the hands out of the corporate elites that run the agriculture business, make millions a year off of it, and then have the government in their pocket, which is the same discussion we had. What was the last time on Twitch, where we were talking about the corporate capitalist state that the United States is, right? It's not an actual capitalist country. It's state corporatism is what it is. And right here, another great example is the latest Wall Street incident. Clearly shows this. It clearly shows it again. And it's like, at what point is it going to stop, right? Like, when do we come and get the power back from the corporate elites? And I'll tell you right now, with the Democrats, this is not the case. Literally, Nancy Pelosi came out and said, you know what, we'll look into more regulations. You're right, Wall Street. Like, literally. And then the next day she turns around, well, we have a fair review process. I'm like, look, if people on Wall Street, hedge fund owners, are telling the government they want more regulations, these are the guys that clearly don't want any regulations now asking for regulations. There's a problem. There is a freaking problem.
They're okay with regulations as long as it benefits them.
Exactly.
I mean, hey, if they make a regulation that says they can shut off the stock market at their own whim, of course they're okay with that. Because the only people it hurts is the people who can't flip that switch, which is like the rest of us, right? And just as let's throw a quick quiz question out here. Who are the two of the largest farmland holders in America?
I actually don't know.
One of them is becoming Bill Gates. So he's taking all that money he's making in the computer business and he's converting it into land. I think right now he is the largest holder by square miles of U.S. farmland. The next one, and they're competing. No, Communist China. Between leases, and outright
Hold on
ownership
though.
by corporate.
What companies are they doing it under though? Because you know the communists, the government's not literally going to be in there. They're going to use
No, no, no,
some
no, no.
different
They use.
companies,
I
some
can't
shell
remember the name.
companies, right? That's how they always do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, because okay, what they do is they
That's how they
make war.
lobby in the United States directly to politicians, is they do it through
Yes,
companies. That's how they do it. And it's literally
they
like this is a violation of the law, but they're just using other means to go around it.
what
It's
they do
completely
is
ridiculous.
they buy or control large stakes of U.S. companies, and the companies, since they are based in the U.S., even though they're owned pretty much outright by the Chinese Communist Party, they get all the subsidies, and it appears as an American company, but it's a shell company for the Chinese Party. And the Chinese Party is one of the largest landowners in the United States. And when I say landowners, they control the land, which means
Yeah.
they either have a contractual agreement with one of their companies to either control that land, or their company outright owns the land. Because the U.S. company, that's how they get around the foreign ownership laws.
And it's a smart move too, because that's probably the one area they don't really have us in, that and like defense, but they've been catching up on defense. But that's, yeah, I will say one good thing out of that. I don't know if you saw, but Department of Justice before Trump left started cracking down on basically the IT technology they've been like stealing from us somehow, right? So what they were doing was they were giving like research grants to different universities, like I don't know, MIT was one of the bigger cases. There was a professor or researcher there, um, and essentially he had got millions of dollars in research grants, which a lot of that does go to research, but also, I mean, this is like an outrageous sum of money. And the reason why he's in trouble is not the fact that you can't take money from like overseas organizations, whatever it is, like because they were technically getting it from like a Chinese university. But
It's
the reason he got
let's just open it up. If it's
but the
from
reason
China, it's party.
I mean, he was a Chinese professor, so that kind of probably gave him away. But the reason he got in
also
trouble,
a military general.
the reason he got in trouble was the fact he didn't file it down on like his taxes and stuff. So that's really where he got in trouble, was the fact that he wasn't transparent about it, right? So maybe next time
you can rape America as long as IRS gets their cut.
That's what there you go. That's the moral of the story. Anyways, let's go back onto the slide here because we're like way off topic. There's our rant on China involvement in the United States right there. So
I'll give you a quick rundown. The way it works is China sends they recruit out of the university systems, all these university people who are communists themselves, whether they realize it or not. They give them all this money to put their students in special access programs, right? After 3 to 4 years, the students get their degree, and then they go back to China, and then those kids are placed as head of corporations in China to run the programs. And they just do it back and forth. That's how they've been stealing. China knows our secrets before our own military even realizes that those things should be special access programs. And they've been doing it for years. Which is basically what you
I mean, I went to a school where it was like clearly like that's like the school I went to, they got most of their funding from like Chinese students, which it's technically great for the university, but at the same time, they're literally like educating Chinese nationals through our education system, send them back to go work for like their government, basically, right? Because like everything.
I literally had a Chinese student tell me how it works. He literally told me how they do it. This was like 15 years ago. How does our own government not realize what they're doing? All you had to do was ask a Chinese student, well, how do you do it? Well, this is what we do. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
All right. So the next slide here, Wall Street Journal, which countries have responded best to COVID-19? So this is definitely something we really have to look at, because this probably indicates future success, right? A good model.
You might need to move another. Panel. The one I'm seeing says future pandemics likely be deadlier and more frequent, warns UN panel. Is that the one?
I think you're behind somehow.
That must be. I'm always behind. What can I say?
Okay, well, I'm gonna read it out loud here. So, okay. All right. So, which countries have responded best to COVID-19? This article is actually from January 1st, so it's possible that things have changed. A successful response to COVID 19 turned out to depend on more than a country's wealth, who would have guessed, scientific prowess, and history of public health successes. Other developed countries that did well initially, such as Canada and some European nations, have faltered during the second or third surge of infections because their governments and people grew tired of implementing effective strategies, aka lockdowns. In many Asian countries, it has long been common for people to wear masks when feeling ill, so they adopted masks early and widely. And below that, there's basically a list of breakdowns, kind of like who did the best at whatever it is. And then I'll kind of show you like a general theme here. So I feel like this is kind of a biased list. I think we need more of like a official study to come out to really give a good analysis on this. But best at early action, Taiwan, one reported COVID-19 death per 3,366, 140 people, I guess, were infected. Best at learning from recent epidemics, Liberia. I think hopefully they'd win on that one. COVID-19's deaths per, let's see, 55,000 people. Best at crushing the curve, New Zealand. One reported COVID-19 death per 204,000 people. Let's see, best at testing, South Korea. One reported death per 63,000. Best at quarantining, Hong Kong. One reported per 54,000. Best economic protection, Denmark. One reported death per 4,000. Best at public communication, Finland. One reported COVID-19 death per 10,000. So really, technically, if you look at all the deaths, Zealand kind of makes the lead there. They got one per 200,000. Everyone else is kind of similar after that. They're all around 50,000. I would say the worst case, the worst out of that entire list was Taiwan. So maybe they were good early on, but in the long run, they started to have issues. But
you know what all those countries
sorry,
have in
it's
common?
3. Is that 3 million actually? Sorry, that's 3 million. So they were really effective. They were the best. Sorry. Go ahead.
You know what all those countries have in common?
They are all small.
That is correct.
They
That's
are all
exactly
small.
That's exactly what I was
And that's
thinking.
what
It
I
is
was-
easier to lock down a house of 7
Yeah.
than it is of 7 million.
I mean, especially
And
a lot of
that's
these are
implying
isolated, you know?
they're islands,
Well,
technically.
I would just say isolated. Like,
Yeah.
you know, Liberia, like there's not a lot of international travel there. Taiwan's an island. South Korea is pretty isolated. It only has
Hong Kong's an
North
island.
Korea, Hong Kong. Yeah, Hong Kong again. I mean, I would hope they're good at quarantining. They're part of China. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so that's why I'm saying this list is kind of unfair. I would say maybe the most fair two are Denmark and Finland. I would say are probably the best fair. Testing, South Korea, I'd give that one to them too. I don't feel like crushing the curve, New Zealand is a good one. Like, okay, they technically won, but like literally they're an island, so I hope that they won. I think
You know what
the list should be
all those
this.
people have in common?
I think the list should be people in the worst situations but did the best. That should be the new list, right?
Yeah. Do you know what all those countries also have in common?
What is that? What else we got?
Other than Taiwan, they don't. The rest of the countries really don't have to worry about going to war with China, because all that's implying, everything we're doing is implying that we're not dealing with a bioweapon.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think China. They may not get along with Taiwan or Hong Kong, but they ain't about to drop something that big on their back doorstep.
Yeah, I would say South Korea, Taiwan. Those are like iffy ones. They have tension. They have tension. So, but let's go on to this next slide here too. So this one I actually had up from the last show that we did. But this one shows you the vaccine doses. So the last slide didn't really take that into account. I went over this last time. So, you know, there's a lot of different reasons here of why certain countries got ahead. I mean, we all know the United States has like the best medical quality and prescription and research than like anyone else in the world, and we like pretty much kick everyone in the face in that area.
You see, that's a common misconception. Do you know who actually probably has some of the best?
It's not a misconception. We technically are best, but I would say, is it Europe? One of the European countries is closely behind us. I want to say Germany or
It's actually Cuba.
Cuba. What are you talking
Yeah,
about? Cuba's
I
what?
was surprised too.
That's the
Cuba has
research?
some of research and what's the word? Yeah, they're on a cutting edge of a lot
I'm
of
gonna have to
medical
look into
stuff over
this.
there.
You have
I
me.
was
You have my
surprised too.
attention. You have
I was
my
surprised. They
attention.
send a lot of doctors. They send a lot of doctors all over the world
Mm,
in top research programs. I was surprised. Per
interesting.
capita, they have one of the top medical programs.
Still, a
That may not be
terrible
true.
country.
That may be propaganda. Yeah, they send a lot of their doctors overseas to work with other overseas doctors,
Oh,
so
I'll
they get
say
a wide breadth
I'd
of
say the
medical
problem is
knowledge.
there though is they don't give it to anybody. I would say so.
Well, no, that's not
That's the
true
key
either.
issue.
They send a
No,
lot of. I was surprised when I heard
I'm
this.
gonna
Yeah,
look
they
this up,
send
man.
a
I'm gonna
lot.
look it up.
Yeah, I said it could be propaganda, but my
Yeah.
understanding is Cuba sends a lot of doctors to like Africa and all these places where they learn and experiment. I mean, experiment's not a good word. Different medical practices over there. So they have. It's not like the U.S. where we're kind of hampered by, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, by rules and regulations. Right? They're a little more free over there to experiment, see what works and doesn't work. Right?
Yeah.
And they also work with a lot of third world countries in like Africa, these other places where they learn. They basically practice battlefield medicine. Right? They don't really care about necessarily the laws. They care about what's effective, and that puts them at the higher end of the medical field. I was surprised when I learned that. It may not be true, more research would require. But when I heard about that, I was like, "You kidding me? Cuba of all places?"
So I'd say
I thought they were still driving 55 Chevys.
With this list right here, as you notice, again, a lot of it is small countries. I mean, that makes sense because it's doses administered per 100 people. So obviously, if you're smaller, you're probably going to make the list. A lot of this too, as you can see, it kind of depends on your trade ability, the amount of money you have to get these different vaccines into your country. So obviously, Israel's like, our number one ally. So if they obviously are going to be lined up next, right, for vaccines or whatever. UAE, also a close partner with us. Both of them, small populations, lots of vaccines. Here you go. United
Israel's
States.
also a huge manufacturer of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so United States and then Bahrain. I'm not really sure which vaccine. I'm thinking maybe Europe, maybe a vaccine from them. But they are also another close like ally of us, I would say. United States, UK, obviously they have their own thing going, so great for them. But like as you see here, United States is up there, large country. Russia and their crappy vaccine, technically better than China's though. Let's see, Canada, Germany. So it's like good on the larger countries to have like such a high number of like vaccines given. Now for the little ones, like you know what, you're little, so I don't want to hear it. You're little.
At the same time,
You
it's
need
like,
another category.
If you're Taiwan or,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Taiwan's not a good example because they got a lot of people on that island, right? But if you're like in a
Yeah.
smaller island country someplace and somebody drops off a pallet of 100,000 doses of vaccine and you only got 50,000 people, I mean, that's 100% vaccination rate at that point.
Right.
Because you can get both shots.
But interesting to see though, who's kind of like rolling out the vaccines. My last show I went into like how effective we've been on that. So that's pretty much all we have for this show. So thank you guys for watching. We're gonna stay in the Twitch for a little bit. See, we have one viewer in there. But please, if you're on Twitch, obviously please follow us. We really appreciate it. But if you're on YouTube, subscribe, share, comment, follow, all the good stuff. Like our videos. And also, if you're on BitChute, we definitely appreciate any type of comments on there. Been getting decent views, so pretty happy about that. Kenny, do you have anything else for the people before we go to the Twitch stream?
I would just say, like we stated earlier, whether stuff's man-made or natural, I mean, this stuff does happen naturally. Be prepared for it. you know, get in the habit of practicing good social habits now, like washing your hands, you know, maybe not making out without a mask, you know.
Only make out with the
Throwing that out
mask.
there.
Or
You
with a
know,
hole in the mouth. I heard that one's a good one too.
I said, don't be stupid. I will add one thing. There was a lot of people who were sitting around thinking that as soon as the Democrats took office, that this whole pandemic thing was going to go away. And I told them not to shove it in your face. Good luck. Ain't going to happen. And guess what? It ain't going away. You know why it ain't going away? Because it gives them an excuse to do whatever they want, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I will caveat there though. I did notice on CNN the ticker's still there, but I will say the death ticker, the death ticker is not up as often. I would say probably as it was before. For some reason, they want the death ticker like not to be the main event on there, but infections per day, yeah, we'll throw that's a lower number. Any type of lower numbers to make it appear a bit better. They have those on the screen though. But that's all we got. Let's wrap up the show real quick. But appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. And this has been another American Experience.
Hey, thanks for watching the Red, White, and Matt Show with Kenny. Please like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for another American Experience.